Yesterday, December 26, Russia claimed that its forces had shot down an F-16 fighter jet supplied by the U.S. to Ukraine. Kiev, the Pentagon, or any external entity has not verified this claim. RT reported that the F-16 was down while attempting to launch missiles at the Zaporizhzhia region of Russia. RT added that preliminary information from the frontline had been confirmed by Vladimir Rogov, co-chair of Russia's Coordinating Council for the Integration of New Regions. Despite these reports being widely circulated by Russian media, as of yesterday afternoon, this news had yet to appear in major Western outlets. If true, this would mark the second F-16 lost in Ukraine during the war. The first one fell in August. At that time, immediately after the first F-16 was delivered to Kiev, it was mistakenly shot down by an air defense system. According to Ukrainian parliamentarian Mariana Bezuglaya, the F-16 piloted by Ukrainian aviator Alexei Munfishmys was struck by a U.S. Patriot missile system due to poor coordination between military units. The Wall Street Journal claimed the Ukrainian pilot died while assisting in repelling a massive Russian missile attack, but denied that the F-16 was down by enemy fire. For this second F-16 incident, few details have been revealed. Ukraine is expected to remain silent, even if the claims of the downing are accurate. Should Russia begin downing Western-supplied fighter jets at higher rates, this would undoubtedly deter Ukraine's allies from sending additional weapons of the same kind. President Zelensky's administration has repeatedly complained about delays in delivering heavy equipment, including jet fighters, from Western partners. Meanwhile, some European countries remain hesitant to commit to many military resources, especially as Ukraine faces setbacks against Russian forces on the eastern battlefield. Russia's announcement of shooting down the F-16 coincides with a plane crash yesterday in Kazakhstan, an incident directly linked to the war in Ukraine. Western media reported that a passenger plane was struck by a Russian air defense missile during a Russian effort to repel a Ukrainian drone attack on Grozny, the capital of the Chechen Republic in Russia. It is suspected that a Russian missile mistakenly hit the Embraer J190 passenger plane, just as a swarm of drones approached. The rocket exploded near the passenger jet, releasing shrapnel that damaged the aircraft's rear fuselage and flight control systems. Euronews first reported this conclusion on December 26, citing sources from the Azerbaijani government. They stated that a Russian Pantsir-S surface-to-air missile struck Flight J28243, operated by Azerbaijan Airlines, forcing an unsuccessful emergency landing attempt in Aktau, Kazakhstan. Additionally, the plane's communication systems were reportedly turned off by electronic warfare activity as it neared Grozny. Despite the pilot's emergency request, Azerbaijani government sources told Euronews that the damaged plane was not allowed to land at any Russian airport. They did not explain why the aircraft was instructed to fly over the Caspian Sea to Aktau in Kazakhstan for an emergency landing. Shortly after the Embraer J190 crashed in Aktau on Christmas Day, footage revealed extensive shrapnel marks on the rear fuselage. The flight tracking website Flightradar24 released altitude and speed data showing that the plane struggled to maintain altitude for over an hour. It is suspected that missile shrapnel damaged the aircraft's stability control system, rendering it unable to land usually. As a result, it crashed during the descent. The West is now calling for a thorough investigation into this crash, aiming to clarify the circumstances surrounding the missile strike, including why landing at a nearby Russian airport was prohibited, and why the plane was directed to cross the sea while severely damaged. Trump, a nightmare for Ukraine. The world watches Trump's actions and statements as his inauguration day approaches. On Christmas Eve, December 24, Trump sent another threatening message to China and Canada. He wrote on Truth Social, "Merry Christmas to everyone, including the great soldiers of China who are lovingly but illegally running the Panama Canal, a place where we lost 38,000 lives building it 110 years ago, always ensuring the U.S. spends billions on repairs, yet has no say in anything. Also, best wishes to Governor Justin Trudeau of Canada, where people endure incredibly high taxes. If Canada became our 51st state, their taxes would drop by more than 60%, businesses would immediately double in size, and they'd enjoy military protection on an unprecedented scale. Likewise, greetings to the people of Greenland, which the U.S. needs for national security, where they want us to be, and where we will be." As previously mentioned in our earlier video, Trump has been criticizing Panama, Canada, and Denmark for causing harm to the U.S. Earlier, Trump threatened to retake the Panama Canal if the Panamanian government colluded with China to raise prices, forcing American ships to pay exorbitant fees to pass through. He warned that if this didn't change, he would abandon the treaty signed during Jimmy Carter's presidency, which transferred complete control of the canal from the U.S. to Panama. Trump has also repeatedly mocked Prime Minister Trudeau, calling him Governor Justin Trudeau, a nickname widely regarded as a joke. During a meeting at Mar-a-Lago, Trump reportedly quipped that if Trudeau dislikes the upcoming 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico, Canada could become the 51st state, with Trudeau serving as governor to avoid the tariffs. Similarly, regarding Greenland, Trump demanded that the Danish government sell the peninsula to the U.S. or eliminate China's monopoly on exploiting resources there. As these statements by Trump drew cautious reactions from Canada, Panama, and Denmark, the New York Times published an article on December 23, connecting this to the situation in Ukraine. The article stated, "The president-elect's declarations, and the not-so-subtle threats behind them, are another reminder that his America First stance is not an isolationist doctrine. His aggressive interpretation of this phrase evokes the expansionism, or colonialism, of President Theodore Roosevelt, who solidified control over the Philippines after the Spanish-American War. It also reflects the instincts of a real estate developer, suddenly armed with the world's largest military, to back his negotiation strategies." Trump has often suggested that he doesn't always regard other nations' borders as sacred. When Russia invaded Ukraine, his initial reaction was not to condemn the blatant land grab but to call President Vladimir V. Putin's move genius. Even now, as Trump seeks a deal to end the war in Ukraine, he has never stated that the country's borders must be restored, a key demand of the US and NATO. Instead, he promises a deal to end the fighting. Given the New York Times' democratic-leaning perspective, this analysis is alarming for Ukraine. Kyiv insists that peace negotiations must include the principle of inviolable borders and territorial integrity, meaning Russia must withdraw to its 1991 borders. However, this principle is wavering as Russia gains the upper hand on the battlefield and Trump secures the presidency. Trump's statements about U.S. interests in the three nations mentioned above also caught the Kremlin's attention. Moscow might argue that if the U.S. seeks to control Greenland or the Panama Canal territory, why shouldn't Russia annex Crimea and Donbas? Currently, President Zelensky's administration hopes that escalating tensions in Kyiv and Russia's devastating attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure will make Trump's team reconsider their promises to end the war and instead continue Biden's strong support for Ukraine. However, this hope seems slim. According to Axios on December 26, in the past 2 years, Republicans have consistently promised to resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Analysts found that Trump publicly pledged to end the conflict 33 times between January 1, 2023, and December 6, 2024. His second most frequent promise, to close the U.S. border, was repeated 32 times. These figures indicate that ending the Ukraine war is Trump's top priority, both before and after the U.S. presidential election. Therefore, the likelihood of Trump and his Republican Party abandoning this commitment to continue supporting Ukraine seems extremely unlikely. Moreover, to counter the Democrats and expose the so-called deep state agenda, Trump might seek to prove that Democrats have ignored large-scale corruption in Kyiv for years. Even independent Ukrainian media recently reported that when Trump returns to the White House, with Republicans controlling the Senate, they will demand Ukraine account for how U.S. aid has been spent. Suppose Trump launches an investigation into this matter. In that case, it will not only further discredit the Democrats, who have supported Ukraine's war efforts to enrich themselves, but also pressure Ukraine to negotiate under Trump's terms. In other words, if Zelensky's administration refuses to negotiate, Trump could cut off aid and wield the corruption investigation as leverage. As Trump signals an apparent unwillingness to support Ukraine and shifts the war's burden to Europe, the question arises, will NATO or the EU shoulder Kyiv's enormous wartime costs? The answer seems bleak for Ukraine, mainly as The Guardian reported on December 26 that support for Ukraine, until victory is achieved, is rapidly declining. A YouGov survey in December across 7 nations, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Sweden, Denmark, and the UK showed a significant drop in support, likely linked to the US scaling back its backing for Kyiv and Trump's impending return to the White House. Similarly, in all these countries, support for ending the war with Russia through negotiations has increased in the four Central EU nations: Germany at 45%, France at 43%, Italy at 55%, and Spain at 46%. Particularly in the UK, support for the war has dropped to an all-time low of 36%. This latest British media survey further underscores that even with European support, prolonging the war would be exceedingly difficult for Ukraine without US involvement. Even if the Trump administration continues to supply weapons to Ukraine, these will not be free grants as they were under Biden. In this scenario, Europe would face enormous military costs at a time when Germany and France are dealing with political and economic crises. Moreover, unlike NATO, the European Union is not a military alliance and has no stringent regulations on providing military assistance if Kyiv refuses to negotiate. Ukraine is unlikely to want to end the war without securing tangible gains to save face with its people, portraying it as a victory, even if it means conceding some territory. This explains why President Zelensky consistently demands that Ukraine be invited to join NATO before he is ready to sign any agreement with Russia. However, this demand has been vehemently opposed by both Trump and President Putin. Currently, Russia is making moves to push the Trump administration to take the first step toward peace negotiations. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has stated that Moscow is ready to work with President-elect Donald Trump's administration to mend relations, provided the U.S. takes the lead. At a press conference in Moscow on December 26, Lavrov emphasized that the ball is in the U.S.'s court to reset diplomatic relations. He asserted, if the new team in Washington is truly serious about restoring dialogue, which they halted after the war in Ukraine began, we will undoubtedly respond. But the Americans broke off dialogue, so they should act first. Lavrov's comments come amid cautious optimism from Ukrainian envoy Keith Kellogg, who noted that both nations appear ready for peace talks, with Trump acting as a mediator. On Russia's side, Lavrov dismissed the idea of a temporary ceasefire to freeze the conflict, instead calling for a sustainable, legally binding peace agreement that guarantees security for Russia and its neighbors. The Russian foreign minister also highlighted the importance of drafting agreements robust enough to prevent future violations. With less than 30 days until Trump's inauguration, the international community is closely monitoring the dangerous escalation between Russia and Ukraine. The Trump administration will face balancing diplomatic efforts with Russia, maintaining dialogue with NATO, and addressing global security concerns.